I walked into that charity gala wearing my best dress, thinking I belonged, but the whispers, the cold stares, the way they turned their backs on me, nothing prepared me for what happened next. Because when he walked in and kissed me in front of everyone, everything changed forever. Before we dive into this incredible story of love, prejudice, and unexpected romance, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss stories like this one. Now, let me tell you about the night that changed my entire life. My name is Jasmine, and 6 months ago, I was working as a children's librarian at the local public library. I wasn't wealthy, wasn't connected, and definitely wasn't the type of person you'd expect to see at a $1,000 a plate charity gala. But sometimes life has a funny way of putting you exactly where you need to be, even when it feels like the last place you belong. It all started with an email that landed in my inbox on a Tuesday morning. The subject line read, "Invitation to the Golden Heart Charity Gala." I almost deleted it thinking it was spam, but something made me click it open. The elegant gold lettering, the fancy hotel venue, the list of prominent attendees, it all seemed too good to be true. Turns out, I had been selected as the recipient of the city's Outstanding Community Service Award for my literacy programs with underprivileged children, and the invitation was part of my recognition. I remember staring at that screen for what felt like forever. The Golden Heart Gala was the kind of event I'd only seen in movies, where wealthy socialites gathered to write checks and show off their designer gowns. Part of me was terrified, but another part of me was thrilled. This was my chance to network, to meet people who might support our library programs, maybe even help us expand our reach to more children in need. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. I spent 3 days shopping for the perfect dress, finally settling on a stunning emerald green number that hugged my curves in all the right places. It cost me almost 2 months of my librarian salary, but I told myself it was an investment. I got my hair done, my nails polished, and practiced talking about my literacy programs until I could explain them with confidence and passion. The night of the gala, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, hardly recognizing myself. I looked sophisticated, elegant, confident. I looked like I belonged. If only I'd known then what I know now, that belonging isn't about what you wear or how you look. It's about how others choose to see you. The grand ballroom at the Riverside Hotel was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow shadows across marble floors, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and fresh flowers. Women glided across the room in gowns that probably cost more than my annual salary, their jewelry catching the light like captured stars. Men in perfectly tailored tuxedos stood in clusters, their conversations peppered with mentions of stock portfolios and vacation homes in the Hamptons. I took a deep breath and stepped into the crowd, my heels clicking against the polished floor. The first thing I noticed was the silence that seemed to follow me. Not a complete silence, but a subtle shift in the room's energy. Conversations didn't stop, but they paused. Eyes didn't stare, but they lingered. I felt like I was walking through invisible spider webs, each glance leaving a sticky residue of judgment on my skin. I approached a group of women standing near the champagne fountain, their laughter tinkling like wind chimes. They were discussing the auction items, debating whether the weekend in Martha's Vineyard was worth the starting bid. I waited for a natural break in their conversation, then introduced myself with the brightest smile I could manage. "Hi, I'm Jasmine. This is my first time at the gala. Everything looks absolutely beautiful." I approached a group of women standing near the champagne fountain, their laughter tinkling like wind chimes. They were discussing the auction items, debating whether the weekend in Martha's Vineyard was worth the starting bid. I waited for a natural break in their conversation, then introduced myself with the brightest smile I could manage. "Hi, I'm Jasmine. This is my first time at the gala. Everything looks absolutely beautiful." The woman closest to me, a blonde with diamonds that could blind a pilot, looked me up and down with the kind of slow assessment usually reserved for livestock auctions. "Oh, how nice," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of sweetness that makes your teeth ache. "Are you here with the catering staff? The servers are wearing such lovely uniforms tonight." I felt my cheeks burn, but I kept my smile steady. "Actually, I'm here as a guest. I received the Outstanding Community Service Award for my work with children's literacy programs." The silence that followed was deafening. The women exchanged glances that spoke volumes, confusion, disbelief, and something that looked uncomfortably like disdain. Finally, another woman with silver hair and a pearl necklace that probably cost more than my car spoke up. "How wonderful," she said, but her tone suggested it was anything but. "Community service is so important. We should all give back to those less fortunate." The way she said "those less fortunate" made it clear that she considered me part of that category. I tried to steer the conversation toward my programs. hoping to find common ground, but their attention had already shifted. They began discussing their upcoming ski trip to Aspen, their voices rising just enough to exclude me from the conversation. I excused myself and moved toward another group, but the pattern repeated itself. Polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes, conversations that died when I approached, and the constant feeling that I was being evaluated and found wanting. One man actually asked me if I was lost, suggesting I might be looking for the staff entrance. But it was Patricia Sterling, the event organizer, who delivered the most painful blow. She approached me with the kind of confident stride that comes from never having to question your place in the world. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her black dress was simple but obviously expensive. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm Patricia Sterling and I organized this event. Might I ask how you received your invitation?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around us, conversations continued, but I could feel the weight of hidden attention. People were listening without appearing to listen, watching without seeming to watch. "I received the Community Service Award," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I run literacy programs for underprivileged children at the public library." Patricia's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "I see, and who exactly presented you with this award?" The implication was clear, she didn't believe I belonged there. I felt my hands trembling slightly as I reached into my purse for the official letter. The paper felt fragile between my fingers as I handed it to her. She examined it with the intensity of a customs agent checking a suspicious passport. Other guests had begun to notice the exchange, their conversations growing quieter as they sensed drama in the air. "Well," Patricia said finally, handing the letter back to me, "I suppose everything appears to be in order, though I must say we usually have more traditional recipients of this particular award." Traditional, the word hit me like a slap. I knew what she meant and she knew I knew. Traditional meant white, traditional meant wealthy, traditional meant not me. As if the humiliation wasn't complete enough, a waiter carrying a tray of champagne glasses bumped into me, or rather I was pushed into him by a woman who claimed she didn't see me standing there. The glasses crashed to the floor, champagne and crystals spreading across the marble like liquid starlight. The entire ballroom seemed to stop and stare. "Oh my goodness," the woman who had pushed me exclaimed, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. "How clumsy of you, are you all right?" I stood there, champagne soaking into my expensive dress, surrounded by shattered glass and the stares of 200 people who had already decided I didn't belong. The waiter, a young man who looked as mortified as I felt, began apologizing profusely while trying to clean up the mess. "It's okay," I whispered, though nothing felt okay. It was an accident, but I knew it wasn't. I knew from the satisfied look in the woman's eyes, from the way Patricia Sterling's lips curled into the faintest hint of a smile, from the whispered conversations that had already begun around us. This was their way of making sure I understood my place. I escaped to the ladies' room, my heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to my humiliation. In the mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized, hair slightly disheveled, makeup smudged, dress stained with champagne and doubt. But it was my eyes that looked the most different. The confidence I'd worn like armor was cracking, revealing the vulnerable woman underneath. I was washing my hands when I heard them, two women gossiping by the powder room vanity, their voices carrying in the acoustics of the marble bathroom. "Did you see that whole scene out there?" one of them was saying. "Honestly, I don't know why they let just anyone attend these events nowadays." "I know," the other replied. Patricia looked mortified. Apparently she's some kind of librarian who thinks she belongs in polite society. Can you imagine? "Well, at least you'll know better than to come back next year. Some people just need to learn their place." Their laughter echoed off the marble walls, sharp and cutting. I stood frozen at the sink, watching water run over my hands as their words ran through my heart. Some people just need to learn their place. The message was clear. My place wasn't here, wasn't with them, wasn't anywhere that mattered. I called my best friend Keisha from a quiet corner of the bathroom, my voice shaking as I told her what had happened. "Baby, you need to come home," she said, her voice filled with the kind of protective anger that only comes from true friendship. "Those people aren't worth your time or your tears." But something in me rebelled against the idea of running away. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe it was the thought of all those children I worked with, everyday kids who faced rejection and prejudice but still showed up, still tried, still believed they deserved better. "No," I said, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. "I'm not leaving. I earned my place here and I'm not going to let them take that away from me." I fixed my makeup, straightened my dress, and walked back into that ballroom with my head held high. The whispers followed me like shadows, but I ignored them. I had something they didn't have: purpose. I wasn't there to impress them or join their exclusive club. I was there because I had made a difference in my community, because I had given children the gift of reading, because I had earned recognition for work that mattered. That's when I saw him. David Montgomery entered the ballroom like he owned it, which I later learned he practically did. He was tall and commanding, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. But it wasn't his appearance that caught my attention, it was the way the entire room shifted when he walked in. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, people straightened their postures and smoothed their clothes. Patricia Sterling practically ran across the room to greet him, her earlier confidence replaced by something that looked almost like nervousness. The same women who had been discussing ski trips and charity auctions now clustered around him like moths to a flame. I watched from my corner as he navigated the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and making polite conversation. He moved through the room like someone who had never questioned his right to be anywhere, never wondered if he belonged, never stood alone by a champagne fountain feeling like an outsider looking in. But then something unexpected happened. His eyes met mine across the crowded room, and instead of looking away like everyone else had been doing all evening, he held my gaze. There was something in his expression, curiosity, maybe, or recognition of something he saw in me that others had missed. To my complete amazement, he began walking toward me. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, people stepping aside to let him pass while shooting curious glances in my direction. I felt my heart hammering against my ribs as he approached, unsure whether to run or stand my ground. "You look like you're having about as much fun as I am," he said when he reached me, his voice warm with humor. "David Montgomery." "Jasmine," I replied, taking his outstretched hand. His grip was firm and confident, and when he smiled, I noticed that it actually reached his eyes. "So, Jasmine, what brings you to this particular gathering of peacocks?" I couldn't help but laugh at his description. "I received a community service award." Though I'm starting to wonder if that was a mistake. "Trust me," he said, glancing around the room with an expression that suggested he knew exactly what I meant. "If they gave you an award, it wasn't a mistake. What kind of work do you do?" For the first time all evening, someone was actually listening when I talked about my literacy programs. David asked thoughtful questions about reading comprehension strategies and funding challenges. He seemed genuinely interested in the work itself, not just making polite conversation. "I've been thinking about educational initiatives," he said. "My foundation has been looking for authentic programs to support, not the kind that look good on paper but don't actually help kids, the kind that make a real difference." We were deep in conversation about childhood literacy when Patricia Sterling appeared at David's elbow, her smile so bright it could have powered the chandelier. "David, darling," she gushed, completely ignoring me. "I've been looking everywhere for you. There are so many people I'd love you to meet." The Hendersons just returned from their place in Monaco, and Victoria Whitmore has been dying to discuss her latest art acquisition with you. I started to step back, assuming this was my cue to fade into the background like I had been doing all evening, but David didn't move. "Actually, Patricia, I'm having a fascinating conversation with Jasmine here about her literacy programs. Did you know she's increased reading proficiency rates in her district by 30% in just 2 years?" Patricia's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, how nice. But surely you have time for the other guests as well? After all, some of our most generous donors are here tonight." The implication was clear. I wasn't a generous donor, wasn't important enough to monopolize David's time. But instead of politely excusing himself like I expected, David did something that stopped my heart. He stepped closer to me, close enough that I could smell his cologne and feel the warmth radiating from his body. Then, without warning, he cupped my face in his hands and kissed me. It wasn't a gentle peck on the cheek or a polite social gesture. It was a real kiss, soft and warm and full of promise. Time seemed to stop as his lips met mine, and for a moment nothing else existed, not the staring crowd, not Patricia's shocked gasp, not the whispers that erupted around us like wildfire. When he finally pulled away, the entire ballroom had gone silent. 200 people stood frozen, their champagne glasses halfway to their lips, their conversations abandoned mid-sentence. You could have heard a pin drop on that marble floor. "I'm sorry," David said, though he didn't look sorry at all. "I should have asked first. But I've been wanting to do that since the moment I saw you standing over there, holding your head high despite everything they've put you through tonight." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. You saw." "I saw," he said simply. "I saw the way they looked at you, the way they dismissed you, the way they tried to make you feel like you didn't belong, and I saw the way you refused to let them break you." The crowd was still silent, still staring, still trying to make sense of what they had witnessed. Patricia Sterling looked like she might faint. The woman who had asked if I was with the catering staff was gaping like a fish out of water. Ladies and gentlemen, David said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom, I'd like you to meet Jasmine. She's doing more to change children's lives than most of us do in a lifetime, and she's about to become a very important partner in my foundation's educational initiatives. The applause that followed was hesitant at first, then growing stronger as people realized that their social standing might depend on how they treated me now. Suddenly, the same women who had ignored me all evening were smiling and nodding, as if they had been welcoming me from the start. But I wasn't paying attention to them anymore. I was looking at David, trying to understand why he had chosen me, why he had kissed me, why he had turned my nightmare evening into something that felt like a fairy tale. Why? I whispered. He smiled, and this time I saw something in his eyes that took my breath away. Because you're real, he said. Because you're here for the right reasons. Because you didn't give up even when they tried to make you feel like you didn't matter. And because something about you makes me want to be real too. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and apologies, of people who suddenly remembered they had been looking forward to meeting me all along, but I barely heard them. I was too busy falling for the man who had seen me when I felt invisible, who had chosen me when I felt rejected, who had kissed me when I felt unworthy of love. 6 months later, as I write this story, David and I are planning our wedding. We've launched 3 new literacy programs together, and his foundation has committed to supporting children's education in underserved communities across the country. But more than that, he's taught me something valuable about belonging. Belonging isn't something other people give you, it's something you claim for yourself. It's knowing your worth even when others don't see it. It's standing tall even when the world tries to make you feel small. It's remembering that the right person will see you for who you truly are, not for what you look like or where you come from. That night at the gala, I learned that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the most difficult moments. Sometimes the person who seems completely out of your league is actually the one who sees you most clearly. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to stay true to yourself, the universe rewards you with something more wonderful than you ever dared to dream. The Golden Heart Gala was supposed to be about charity, about giving back, about making the world a better place. And in the end, it was, just not in the way anyone expected. This story taught me that sometimes the most unexpected moments lead to the most beautiful outcomes. If you loved this story of standing strong against prejudice and finding love in unexpected places, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. Remember, you never know who's watching and what amazing things might happen when you stay true to yourself.